I kind of address these the homework and the assignment from the standpoint of telling mood, like for a story for filmmaking. But if you're doing paintings for yourself or for galleries or just exploring pure aesthetics, you're still telling a story. You're still telling something, and it doesn't mean that you don't do these things. What it means is you have to come up with those ideas, because that's part of your personal expression, and they do have consequence. All of this has consequence in your image, and that's the thing with composition. It's all about every mark. For every mark you put down or every move you make, there's a consequence. Okay, consequence isn't really a bad word. It's just the result of you add this, it means that. You add this, it has an effect. You add this, it adds another effect. So everything has an effect on the total. And so there's a consequence for every mark or every move you make. Now, it doesn't really matter where that piece of art is going to be or where your intentions are about it. Finding either clarity or monotony or chaos or whatever, that needs to be in your control. And composition is really about understanding your visual language, because when you do that, then you can manage that, and you're in control of it. And you can say things poetically, you can say things boldly, you can say things any way you want, but you're working in that visual medium. So yeah, all of these things, they do matter. It's not just a case of a different genre doesn't mean you discount certain things. What I did with these, I'll just explain this one again just to make clear. The image at the top is just my black and white matrix. The second one down on the left, the middle one on the left, is the value ranges that exist in the black zone of my matrix. And the image on the right, the top right, those are the values in the ranges in my light zone of the matrix. And you can see there's a clear gap between the values set up in the black group and the values set up in the light group. They keep a clear distinction. There's a gap. They don't get muddled. Okay, and so that's very important. Again, the same thing. Setting up. We can see that in the upper image on the top, there's just a couple values in that, and then I expanded them. And then when I start applying color, I start looking at. I didn't paint it black and white first. This was just purely all in color. But when this is my thinking. The first example at the top really kind of displays my thinking. So I'll first design in these simplified value groups, and then I think about the range of values and also the color and the range of color temperature, saturation, and hue within those different value groups. So that's what it's those tonal ranges that are going to keep separation there. I put some information on here just describing the exercise that we went through, and there's some further reading on there. Here's an example of a really strong high contrasting light. This was a situation where I had a sunlight in the studio, and I had a model sitting there, and I just opened the sunlight when it was like midday, and when you don't have a lot of reflected light like the sky, if she was sitting outside, all those dark areas would be filled. Okay, but because she's indoors and there isn't the sky, then all you see is the direct light from the sun. This is what it looks like. Okay, so you really see those shadow shapes really harshly. Okay, and again, when you're outside, your greatest or your most intense light source is the sun, and your largest light source is actually the sky. So when you remove the sky from your situation, your values shift radically because you don't get the fill from the sky, and that's what's going on here. These pretty much illustrate the this notion that what we were doing, overall high major key, okay, and a little bit more contrast in the lower image. So I'm adjusting the minor key. These aren't my paintings, but these are adjusted so that you can see. They weren't done for this exercise, but they're great examples of how changing your minor key can change the mood of your piece. Again, here's another one. Okay. High major key, and this is more of a medium minor key. Here's, here we go. Overall dark, so it's a low major key and medium minor key, you know. It appears there's a lot of contrast. I have a high contrast in here, but you can see from the image above, there's no real white in there. It's all a mid value. It appears bright because of the saturation. Okay. Now the painting above here is overall dark, because there's a large amount of this image that's dark, and then there's a lot of contrast with the whites and the yellows and stuff, and there's also a triadic color arrangement. So there's very saturated yellow, red, and blue in this image. Okay, besides the high contrast, there's a strong presence of yellow, red, and blue. And so almost symbolically, these, you know, the robes and stuff have these full ranges. So the saturation is going to make the appearance of contrast, increase the appearance of contrast, because you do see the contrast of saturation from black to fully saturated color in there. The next image in this painting, again, this is a low major key and a high minor key. But in this image, this one has a limited palette. Black, white, red, and a little bit of yellow. Okay? So this one doesn't appear to have the same range of contrast, but it does. It does have the same range of contrast. It's just a case where this one has a little less range of saturation in yellows and blues. So we only see the real saturation in the red. Okay, so that being the case, it feels like it's a little bit, has a little bit less contrast range than this image up here. Okay, but it's really due to the saturation and the different hue, this triadic scheme to a limited palette scheme. Now here's an image that's got a good amount of contrast in it as well, but this one is really low saturation. So the low saturation, again, it makes you more aware of the light-dark patterns. When you don't have quite as much saturation in there, it makes the tonal contrast appear stronger, almost. Just kind of an interesting effect. Okay. Now, when I was talking before about, about capturing a mood in here, this is an example where if it's overall light, okay, so it's mostly light overall, it has a good portion of medium value, and then there's some high contrast, really high contrast. So it makes it feel like a bright kind of a sunny day. This has got a little larger proportion of medium values in it. So I'm going to go back to the previous one here, and I'll draw on my board here. I'll draw two images. I'll draw these two images, and I'll just show you the difference in the setup here. In the first one, in the first image, there's this remains fairly light. It's light in the middle. This remains light in here. There's a middle range, middle value range that sits back here, interrupted by the fountain. image in here, okay? And then we have some darks in here, some really dark accents. And to keep these kind of minimized, the amount of darks that we have in here is going to keep this kind of on a, make it feel bright and sunlit. If I get too many darks in here, it's not going to. So I can put some other darks back here. I'll show you the difference between this one and the other image. Okay, so now I'll go to the next image, and this one has a greater proportion of this medium value. Okay, so I've got a section like this, right? So this has a medium value in here, and it goes down and has a little bit of a gradient down in here. This area in here is kind of a medium. This is slightly darker. Slightly darker there. And then I'm getting some darks in here. You can see how the mood changes with these larger amounts of darks or medium values in here. Sorry, I give them about 3 heads worth there. Okay, so you can see that this one feels like it's a brighter day because it has, than this one, because this has more area of more of this light medium value. This has a similar light medium value, but it's in a less proportion to the overall, and they both have these real darks. So this one sets off as feeling a little bit more bright and uplifting, where this one has a little bit more of a mood to it because it has this light medium value that kind of laid down over this and doesn't have as much bright values and high contrast light as this. So that's, even in just these subtle images, you get a value change, okay, or a setup between your tonal contrasts that makes a difference. So when you're composing image, if you're working from a model or you're working from landscape or whatever, keep these things in mind because they're going to have an effect on on how your image comes across. Okay, so here's some designs where you can see the local values are adjusted, things are manipulated, and there's an effect of light, kind of a faux effect of light in these images. And if I look at the top image, there's overall, there's a light shape, okay? And it's shadow under here. I'm going to go ahead and draw this. It's kind of a simplified version of this. Okay, so this is pretty much where it is. So this is my lightest. Then I have this area here. Then I have this area in here, which is a little darker. So creating these kind of tonal mood in here. This back here is overall a little bit darker. So and then the foreground here, there's a real dark here. And then under this, there's the effect of light by painting in a strong shadow underneath this. Okay? Now, if you look at this, there's less contrast. There's a little contrast in the background, but there's less contrast in the background. There's high contrast right in here. This is a great area of greatest contrast because I got my lightest light right next to my darkest dark right in here. Now, this is done for a reason because when I'm going to put a character in here, if I'm going to put a character in, I might have a character light over dark, which means they're going to read real clear. The only thing I need is under this character, if I have a character sitting here, all I need is a contact shadow under there, and that's going to read like it's in light because it's against dark. If I had another character here, let's say, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a shadow under here to be consistent with this. And again, I'm going to make it read light over dark there as well. Yeah. And that's how you set it up. So you always set up light over dark, and then here, dark over light. That's how this can help. And you're going to find the same applications in more of your classic traditional artists, because these guys were pulling those same fundamentals from them. It came from them. This wasn't contrived because it's a cartoon. It was brought in because they were crafting a new art form. So that's kind of the way that it gets set up. I'll do one more over here too, and just kind of show you another example, from the same page. Okay, so in this image, I'm going to be drawing the effect of light. So I want to say, in this image, this is my area that's going to be in light. Okay? Now, there's going to be some little areas that are a little lighter, and some areas are going to be a little darker. I might break this up just a little bit because I think it's broken up just a little. With the form, in these areas, there's a little bit of feeling of form going on. So they're going to be broken up just a little bit. Right? But overall, this is going to go a little darker, and this is going to merge with it. And again, if we're just keeping these things simple, this is just an idea just to keep it really simple. We can go in and make our darks in here. Saying these in-between areas are really dark in here. I'm going to blend this now. And the same thing here, because if I'm going to have I might have a couple little things in here that might be little accents in there, but if I want to have the characters, I know I'm going to have the action in here, and all I'm going to need is a contact shadow under here, and if this is my character here, then they're going to read pretty clear. Pretty much like that. So I know where I'm going and what I'm pushing. If I get a little bit more contrast in here, it'll make it more dramatic. Sorry for the crudeness, but I'm rushing through here just to pay that off. Okay?